And when we start off with this condition, which is known as the tic disorders, it's again very important to focus on is this fact that what is basically a tic, or how do you basically define a tic? Now, tics are basically the repetitive, sudden, non-rhythmic movements. They can be the vocal or of the complex motor type, and these are basically known as these involuntary movements are basically known as the tics in the person. Then there is a condition which is quite famous and is known as the Tourette syndrome, which is related to this kind of a tic disorder. How do you diagnose a person to be suffering from Tourette syndrome? If the person is suffering from the vocal and the motor tics for more than 1 year, then only we can diagnose this particular person to be suffering from Tourette's syndrome. So this is the main crux of this section over here. We'll be focusing on the particular definition of these tic disorders. There is obviously a range of tic disorders even other than the Tourette syndrome that are present. There can be the transient vocal tics, then there can be the transient motor tics. Then we have the other unspecified tic disorders over here. And then the most notorious is the Tourette syndrome, which is quite frequently present in a lot of people. So over here, we'll be discussing the definition of these tic disorders over here, and then we'll be moving on to the motor tics. We'll be defining that these tics can be basically characterized as the simple motor tics, or they can be characterized as the complex motor tics as well. Then we have another kind of a tics, which is known as the vocal tics, that basically involves the vocal phonations. And again, these are the involuntary vocal phonations. Again, there is these repetitive and these sudden vocal sounds that are produced by that particular person in this kind of a condition. So over here, when we define a tic, it's again very important that basically a tic is a sudden, rapid, recurrent, non-rhythmic, stereotyped motor movements or vocalization in that particular person that we're dealing with. So over here, it may be simple and involving the few muscles or simple sounds. So it can even be the involvement of a few facial muscles, and then it can be the simple sounds produced by that particular person. On the other hand, we have the complex tics. Now, how do you basically define these complex tics? Involving the multiple group of muscles. It can be the group of the facial muscles. It can be the group of muscles involving the upper limbs, lower limbs, or the muscles of the neck can be involved over here. And then we have recruited in the orchestrated brouts or words or sentences. That is basically the compilation of the vocal tics on one hand, and on the other hand, the motor tics are also compiled along with it. So that is basically how the complex tics are produced in that particular person. When we define the motor tics, they are generally lasting, that is less than several hundred milliseconds. Usually it is a sudden and a non-rhythmic and an involuntary contraction of the muscles. So it basically lasts for several hundred milliseconds. Examples are the eye blinking, and then we can have the nose wrinkling or the neck jerking. On the other hand, we have the shoulder shrugging, we have the facial grimacing, we have the abdominal tensing. So these are the range of the simple motor tics that can be present in a person. These are mostly the examples of the simple variant type of the motor tics. Over here. Then we have the Tourette syndrome that we were already discussing. Tics is one of the factor over here. Then the person is also suffering from OCD. That is basically the obsessive compulsive disorder. There are behavioral problems, poor impulsive control, other behavioral disorders are also associated with it. Then the person is also suffering from ADHD, that is basically the attention deficit hyperactivity syndrome. So it's basically the compilation of all of these characteristics, including the tics. Along with that, the person has OCD, ADHD, and other behavioral problems that he is suffering from. Then we have another variant, which is basically the motor complex tics, longer in duration than the simple tics, usually lasting seconds or longer. The examples basically include hand gestures or facial contortions. It can also include jumping, touching, pressing, or stomping phenomena. Then we have the repeatedly smelling of an object. So one of the factor or one of the gesture is the smelling of the objects that is observed. Squatting or deep knee bends are sometimes performed by these people. And then we have the retracing steps or twirling when walking. So these are some of the gestures that the person is repetitively involuntarily making, and then only we can call that person to be suffering from these motor complex tics. Assuming or holding unusual positions, and then dystonic tics, holding neck in a particular tensed position. So it's one of the tic disorders that is included in the motor complex variant type over here. Then there are some other complex variants which are known as the copropraxia, and we have the echopraxia on the other hand. Over here, when we define this condition, which is known as copropraxia, it's basically, it's going to be sudden, the tic-like vulgar, sexual, or obscene gesture. So if it's a gesture, if it's a vulgar gesture, then it's known as the copropraxia. Now, how do you basically differentiate this copropraxia from echopraxia? Echopraxia is a mirror phenomena like involuntary, spontaneous imitation of someone else's movement. So it's not basically a vulgar kind of a movement that was basically making up, or we were defining it to be copropraxia. That is another terminology. And echopraxia is basically just a mirror-like movement that is usually made by the person who is performing that echopraxia, or is suffering from that complex motor kind of tics phenomena. Both are complex motor tics varieties. So both of these are the variants of the complex motor tics. Then we have the vocal tics. Vocal tics are again of the simple variant kind. They're meaningless, brief sounds. So usually they do not mean, it's not a complete word that is uttered by the person, but it's a single sound that is phonated by the person, and it's usually meaningless. The examples include the throat clearing phenomena that is repeatedly, involuntarily, suddenly performed by the person. These three phenomena should be present in all of these gestures, because even normally these gestures are performed by the people, and we do not designate them to be suffering from these tics phenomena. It's only when these gestures are involuntarily and more repetitively, suddenly performed by the people that we diagnose them to be suffering from the tic disorders. So throat clearing is one of the vocal tic phenomena that is basically included in the simple form of the vocal tic variant. And then we have the grunting and the sniffing phenomena. On the other hand, it can be the snorting sounds that are performed by these people. And then we have the chirping sounds that can also be performed by such people. When we characterize these motor tics into simple and the complex variants, obviously the vocal tics will also have these variants, referring to them as the simple or the complex varieties of these vocal tics. In 166 babies has a tic disorder. So this is quite a frequent disorder that is present in the people. In 1 in 100 have epilepsy, 1 in 45 have autism, 1 in 20 have sensory processing disorders, 1 in 12 has asthmatic conditions, 1 in 12 have speech disorders, 1 in 10 have ADHD, that is attention deficit hyperactivity syndromes, and 1 in 5 have eczemas. So it's certainly a frequent disorder, obviously less frequent, but it's still present in the babies. So one should know how to diagnose and how to know the symptomatology that is particularly related to these kind of disorders. More clearly, they involve the speech and the language of the person. The examples basically include the sudden spontaneous expression of the single words or the phrases in the people. Then we have the speech blocking phenomena that is observed. And then we have the sudden and the meaningless changes in the pitch, emphasis, or the volume of the speech. So these are the characteristics that are present in the complex variant of the vocal tics phenomena that is observed in these people. So over here in this section, we focused on the tic disorders particularly, and that is basically there's a range of variants that is present, and one should know what is the different kind of the symptomatology that is present in these people. So that is the end of this section. Thank you for watching sqadia.com.